Alrighty everyone, hello, and now you know what? We are getting into that time that is one of my favorite times of the year at this point, and that is the planning the garden time. So I have tried my hand at gardening like 3 times now since I've been living in this apartment. We have a really great outside like backyard area for it. My landlord is really forgiving and is totally fine with me just like tearing up the front and the back flower areas to replace all of the daffodils that were there with like lavender and chamomile and all that. He has been such a sweetheart and very helpful in like trying to give me some pointers and show me his own garden and stuff, so I've had plenty of ways to learn. However, given that I do rent, I'm not someone who can like redo the entire yard, like landscape the whole thing and put down all of the more permanent planters that I would really like to do in the future. So what I do end up doing is things like this garden tower that I have back here, in which somehow I have a single parsley plant that managed to survive, I don't know how, as well as container gardening in the front for things like, say, basil or things that aren't gonna last, you know, throughout the winter. And then in the ground is where I put my oregano, my thyme, my rosemary, my lavender, my chives, and other things that are just gonna come back year after year to do their thing. But even if I do have stuff that's in the ground and that is perennial, meaning it comes back every year, I do have to think about how and what I'm going to go down to the garden center to get. And I've tried my hand at many different things. I've tried starting things from seeds. I've tried doing in-ground gardening with a plot that like wasn't the best, and so it wasn't really nutrient rich enough for my plants. I tried the container garden and, you know, the big tower that I showed you already. And I found that after 3 years of struggle, I finally have a sense of what plants are actually worth it for me to grow. So this is how I'm going to plan my garden this year, and I hope that this just little discussion kind of helps you figure out how you might want to plan your garden as well. So first things first when it comes to the garden is obviously you have to consider your whole climate to begin with. I am in an area, I think 6B, and so 6B, traditionally, in like all the years I've ever known people who garden and like gardening myself, the time to actually get plants in the ground is pretty much right after Memorial Day, so like end of May. And that's because you don't want to put plants in the ground until you're absolutely sure that both the threat of frost has passed and also that like the temperature is going to be moderately stable. Typically people will use something like the Farmer's Almanac to figure this out, so like, you know, there's usually a predicted final frost date for your area wherever you are. For mine it's like May 14th is generally like we're out of the woods and there's not going to be another frost. But in the times I've been impatient and gone and planted in those couple weeks before Memorial Day, I really messed up my plants because the weather wasn't stable enough yet. So what I mean by that is instead of having like a pretty consistent like warm maybe 50s to 60s temperature as summer goes on, it would just kind of snap, right? From like 40 to 50 to 60, sometimes even 70, and then back down to like 36, 40, something like that. And when the temperature changes that rapidly, it really stresses out the plants. And these are young plants, keep in mind. They are seedlings that I got from the store. So they're not really built to handle that. Even if they're hardened off and they're able to handle outside temperatures, that constant fluctuating extreme temperature change really stresses them out, and you'll see that in their leaves and in their stem, which is going to get like purpley. It's going to get, you know, those spots on the leaves. It's going to just struggle. It's not going to grow very well in the beginning either. On top of that, that early period is also a time when the pests are probably starting to thaw as well, and therefore the soil that you're putting your plants in is potentially very dangerous because of a thing called a cutworm. I did not know about these the first time I gardened. And so when I tell you that I was just absolutely baffled as to why my tomato plant looked like a little fairy had come, taken an axe and chopped it down, oh my god, it was such a mystery to me, and I didn't understand what was going on until I found those little silver worms and realized what they are. Now, I live in a very like rural, foresty area, so I don't really want to be using a lot of pesticides because we get a lot of different kinds of bugs out here. Bees, we have so many bees. We have dragonflies, we have wasps, we have ladybugs, and, you know, crickets, and all these other kinds of things that I don't want to hurt by trying to keep my plants safe. So what I do is I try to find more natural ways of dealing with them, and with cutworms, I know that they actually really like cornmeal but can't digest it, so they will go for the cornmeal and eat it and then just kind of die on their own because they can't digest the cornmeal. Likewise, there are other bugs that are going to come out, like, especially if you're someone who plants squash, called vine borers, and these are the, I believe, larvae of moths that are very attracted to the color yellow. What color is a squash flower? Hey, bitch! Yay, biddy! Oh, biddy! Squash flowers are yellow, and so that's why this kind of moth likes to lay its eggs on it, and then even though your squashes are doing beautiful in the beginning of the season, so big with their huge leaves, and, you know, just starting to make all these flowers, make all these fruits, suddenly in the middle of the season, they all die because these vine borers get into the vines and usually like to eat them at the main vine. Never the other ones, never any of the 1,000,002 leaf stems, always at the main one. Some ways of dealing with that, I guess, are like putting foil on the main stem so they can't really bore into it as well, or even using a kind of bacteria. There is something that you can actually get from the store and spray on it that is safe for bees, but is really bad for like caterpillar larvae and will do a number on those pests. And the last one, of course, which we don't have to worry about until later in the season, is hornworms. One year, I went on vacation during harvest season, which was very dumb of me, but that's when I was able to go. And I asked my parents to watch the peppers and tomatoes I had, and they did. Except for when they came back one day to water them, they saw that literally everything down to the stick had been eaten on my plants, and that is the work of the tomato hornworm. It is a moth caterpillar that really likes to eat any kind of nightshade, like tobacco, like tomato, like, peppers, anything like that. And it's devastating because they blend in really easily to the branches, but if you take a black light at night, it's very easy to find them and just pull them off. And if you ever see one that looks like this with all these things on it, don't touch it. All of those things are wasp eggs, and those eggs, when they hatch, will eat the hornworm. What? What? BD, why are you mad? Why are you so angry? No. But that little bit about pests aside, the thing is that these are going to be the things that bother you and really screw you up in those early times of planting. So you want to have a plan in place to deal with that, and my plan right now is to just plant later. Plant after Memorial Day to hopefully get any hornworms that are in there out, to get them to eat something else, and also to give me some time to get some more stable weather. Another thing when we think about what we're going to plant is to consider how much space we have. So I already kind of prepped my garden a little bit by tearing out all of the old stuff from last year. I pulled out all of the old plants, all the old roots, and you know, there's a lot of grass over there because I'm not really good at handling the weed whacker. So I just let it grow, which inevitably means crickets live in there and then eat all my oregano later in the season. I should do something about it. I'm also looking at what spaces I reasonably have. So I know that one of my chives didn't really make it, the other one's starting to come back, and I'm thinking that I might want to fill these empty spots in my like front perennial area with more things that are going to come back. Maybe another lavender, maybe more chives, something that I know will be able to get really good roots down in the soil and then just keep on trucking. I did plant one emergency rosemary in one of these pots because I wasn't sure if my in-ground rosemary was going to make it, but it did survive. It survived 2 winters in a row, my in-ground rosemary. I'm very proud of it. So I'm not going to need this one, and since it was in a pot, it didn't really survive anyway. So I have at least 3 pots, actually 4, because I have an empty one that I plan to fill, that I can use for things that need more space than my container garden allows for, the big tower in the back. So when it comes to those are the kinds that I would rather fill with a single tomato plant or a single eggplant plant or something that's going to make big fruits. The bigger the fruit, or at least the more fruits, the more space you're going to want it to have. And anyone who knows tomatoes knows that they really like to have their own space. I planted tomatoes last year in my container garden and in my big tower, and it just really didn't work out well. It just wasn't very good, right? I want to have a bigger harvest, so I'm going to try to put single tomatoes in single buckets and see if that does any better. And now when it comes to the actual container garden, right, like this big tower, I noticed that there were some things that thrived really, really well in there, and those were especially herbs and things that can grow in small spaces like peppers. I had some success with eggplants as well, But eggplants are kind of like in between peppers and tomatoes in terms of how much space they like, and I would recommend putting them in their own pot instead of doing like a big thing like this where everyone just has their own little pocket of space. But I do plan to bring back more annual herbs, and annual herbs are things like basil, parsley, cilantro, borage, or any other things that are going to die off in the frost. So, you know, if you have things like dill, if you have things like even chamomile, other things that have like kind of shallow roots and they only last a season, these work great in containers like this because they don't need super much space to grow, but also they're not going to last after the season anyway, so there's no reason to think about like longevity with them. The only herb I would put in a container is anything in the mint family. So for instance, in this big wooden barrel, I actually have a couple things of lemon balm, and lemon balm is part of the mint family, and these guys are really aggressive growers. They very easily take areas over. Like my neighbor has a patch of mint that is just massive, and it was planted from a little mint patch forever ago and has now expanded past that little flower patch and is even growing around the side of the house. Mint is very, very aggressive, so you really don't want to let that just go everywhere. But right now I'm still kind of deciding how much and what kinds of things I even want, right? So I know that I like tomatoes as a way of getting like a snack. It's really nice. I really, really do enjoy growing things like zucchinis and cucumbers as well. I also love eggplants, mostly because their flowers are so fuzzy and so cute, and I love them. But I'm not the only one who lives here. I got my boyfriend here too, right? And there are some things that he doesn't like. So now we're going to talk about how I decide what exactly I'm going to plant. Now, there's a very big balance to hit between growing things for food and growing things for magic, because I had a poor tarragon plant last year that I just kind of, it grew and I did nothing with it the entire time because I don't use tarragon that much in my food. I thought I would use it more for witchcraft, and then I never did. When it comes to using your space, you really want to use it wisely and use it on things you know that are going to be regularly a part of your cooking. And you also want to keep in mind that if you want to have like proper harvests of things, you got to have actually quite a few plants. Like if you only have 2 basil plants, well, you're not going to be making margarita pizzas every week because you need to give those plants a break and not take all the leaves off, or else they're just going to die because all their leaves are gone. So technically every one of these pockets is something that can handle a whole separate plant. And I thought I was going to give them some space last year, and then I just did not. I put a single plant in every single one of those, and for the most part that was okay. I just had too many big plants in there, too many tomatoes, peppers, and zucchinis all in one pot. So this time that is exclusively for herbs, and it's going to be for herbs that I really, really, really like to use a lot of in the summer. I love using fresh herbs in dishes in the summer, and I'm mainly using things like chives, basil, parsley, rosemary, thyme, and maybe cilantro, and maybe dill, depending on if I'm making certain kinds of salads or other kinds of fresh dishes. I'm not going to be growing all kinds of weird stuff, although I'm definitely going to grow borage again, mostly because I noticed that the bees in my area really, really, really like the borage flowers. So not only are those flowers good to make tea out of, does the same thing as like chamomile or lavender, but also just they are really good for bees. Bees like them a lot. And that's enough reason for me to plant it, to be honest. The bees enjoy the flowers while they're there, then they fall off and you just pick them up and put them aside to dry and make a tea out of them. You can also apparently use the body to make a German green sauce. And given that it kind of acts like a vine like cucumber and smells like cucumber when you break off a piece, I could see it. But this year I am not going to grow any eggplants or grow any cucumbers or zucchinis or squashes because my boyfriend doesn't like these. And as a result, I end up always growing these eggplants that then only I eat, and then a bunch of zucchini that make me make a bunch of zucchini dishes that he's not a fan of. So rather than grow things just because they're really satisfying to grow things that you know people are going to eat, so you don't like just waste your resources. And again, trust me, I know squashes are so nice because they're so satisfying to the farmer's ego when they get really nice and big and green and bushy, and you got those really long, shiny green fruits. Like, very easy wins when you grow squashes. They grow prolifically. Nightshades, on the other hand, like peppers and eggplants and tomatoes, take a lot longer to grow. However, here's the thing. For all my container gardening, I'm not really at a place where I can make enough from a garden to replace going to the grocery store. So I end up having to go to the store and buy like bell peppers and things anyway. It's not really worth it. One day, when I have my dream garden and it's huge and massive, yeah, sure, I'm going to try as hard as I can to reduce my summer grocery bill with what I'm growing in the garden. But for now, I would rather focus on things that I don't use that much that when I buy them at the store, I end up wasting a lot of things. And that is namely in certain kinds of hot peppers. Last year I grew Thai chilies just so I could make some really good pad Thai, and let me tell you, it was so worth it. It was so worth it, oh my god. But I really like hot peppers. What I like to do, especially with my food, because my boyfriend and I really like spicy foods, I will have those fresh hot peppers and just kind of cut them up as like something to sprinkle on a dish after. A lot of the things I make go really well with that little pop of fresh spicy pepper, like pumpkin curry, like taco bowls, like pretty much anything that uses that savory cinnamon oregano combo or curry powder or anything like that. Spicy peppers are fantastic and things like that. And when I think of magic, of course, I'm also keeping in mind that because these are the things that are available to me to grow, these are the things that magically are going to mean a summer that's a lot focused on prosperity, on communication, on social life, things like that. Like my lemon thyme still carries some of those properties of lemon, because actually the reason it smells like lemon is because it has that similar citrus oil in it, just like lemons do. So my lemon thyme is a big player. Likewise, when you got things like basil and chives and dill and all these other things, it's really, really nice to bring in some of that communication, like mercury air magic with the dill and the chives, as well as a lot of that more, success-based, prosperity, sunny, fiery energy that's in like rosemary and basil and everything else that's just going crazy up in the peak of summer. Honestly though, again, as I said, I would focus on what you're going to eat first, what you're going to use for magic second. If you plant things just for magic, you may end up never really using them in the kitchen, and then you're just going to end up just cutting a bunch down and drying them for your own magic purposes, which over a while can build up a really big stock and almost feel, at least to me, kind of wasteful, because you never actually get to use them for those fresh flavors, right? If we go to the grocery store in the middle of winter to get those fresh herbs, and then you got them right here in your yard, you're not using them, it just eventually it feels like a waste. I know that I'm definitely focused on like peace, prosperity, and good mental stimulation, like intellect, communication, all that stuff. So I'm looking for things that are based in fire and air, things that are based with Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter, and things that are known for helping sleep, like chamomile, like lavender, like all these other kinds of things. That's what's going to be really, really helpful in my magic, and that's what I'm going to be looking for. And I'm especially going to be looking to increase the amounts of things I have, because while I really had a lot of chamomile last year, it still wasn't enough for me to have like a really big harvest of it. And so I ended up leaving a lot of the flowers so I could make more seeds, and then really only got like maybe 1.5 pots of tea out of it. Likewise, I want to boost the lavender amounts, because a couple bushes of lavender, turns out, until they get really, really big, don't make that much lavender. It makes you realize, when you do farming, why most of humanity was on the brink of starvation for so many years. Farming is hard. Getting enough food from these plants to actually sustain yourself and then preserve enough for winter, hard. Very, very, very hard. But nonetheless, right now, while we've got the privilege to do it and enjoy our gardens just for us, and even if you're just planting stuff for the sake of watching things grow, I do encourage you to do so. It is honestly really nice, from a magical standpoint too, to build the relationship with the plant you're using in your magic, as well as use it in your spell work. It's really, really fun to actually take a piece of a plant that you watered, cared for, and talk to, if you like to talk to your plants, because that adds. It only adds to the magic. It never takes away if you don't have it, but it only adds if you do. And I just get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing the plants get taller every week, seeing new growth on them, seeing how new leaves are popping up, seeing the flowers open. Everything about the gardening process is just wonderful, and I really encourage you guys to do it, and also think about what you would even want in your garden when you go to do that. So, I hope that's helpful, and I will see you guys next time for the whole month of April, all kinds of shenanigans we got going on. See ya!